So here on pages 9, and a bit of 10, Strickland chews out Marty some more. He says ball droppings again, yes, and tells Marty that the office phone is only for emergencies, and Marty says,
"Well, it was an emergency to the person who called me."
And Strickland gives him study hall. We didn't have this in Canada, but judging by American movies it's where you go to study after class, but you're, like, forced to study? We called it detention and you just had to sit there. No Walkman allowed? McFly argues with Strickland, rightfully saying it's not his fault, and maybe he should send whoever called him to study hall instead. Strickland proudly announces he heard the whole conversation. Marty replies that's illegal wiretapping. Strickland says it's eavesdropping and there's a difference and it doesn't matter because he's in school, and in this school, Strickland is the law. This is a nice bit of writing, a quick way to tell us what kind of guy Strickland is, showing us how he'll be legitimately unfair to Marty and act like a true dickweed. Quick aside, are you allowed to say dickweed on Tumblr? Compare movie Mr. Strickland, who is authoritarian and uncompromising but never actively dickish, to book Mr. Strickland, who is perfectly happy to break the law in order to ascend to new heights of dickweed. Quick aside, I still don't know if I'm allowed to say dickweed on Tumblr.
When you get out of study hall, you can tell Doc he's no friend. Strickland says, then has a sudden flash of intuition. This wouldn't be Doc Brown, would it? McFly's silence told him he had successfully identified the caller, Doc Brown, the town eccentric, a man who in Strickland's estimation was simply no good, a child who never grew up.
It's a weird description of Doc Brown to introduce us to the character with, but whatever, it's Strickland's description and anything Strickland wants to think is a-okay in my books. And the very next bit is another big line, coming right up. Here's how it happened in the movie. In this timeline, Strickland catches Marty and Jennifer coming in late.
Doc, am I to understand you're still hanging around with Dr. Emmett Brown McFly? Hearty stuff for you, Miss Parker. And one for you, McFly. I believe that makes 4 in a row. Now let me give you Nichols' worth of free advice, young man. This so-called Dr. Brown is dangerous. He's a real nutcase. You hang around with him, you're going to end up in big trouble.
Oh, yes, sir.
You've got a real attitude problem, McFly. You're a slacker. You remind me of your father when he went here. He was a slacker, too.
Here's how it happens in our book timeline, where Mr. Strickland is a telephonic peeping Tom.
Strickland, let me give you a nickel's worth of free advice. That Doc Brown is trouble. A real nutcase. Perhaps even dangerous, Marty, loyally.
That's what the book says, loyally?
To you, maybe. I don't see it that way. Strickland, then you're not only dim-witted, McFly. You've got a severe attitude problem. You're a slacker. You've got aptitude but you don't apply yourself.
Wow. You can see really the rewards of rewriting and editing when comparing those two sequences, huh? It is nice to see the strongest part about the nickel's worth of free advice remains intact. The nickel's worth of free advice thing is a real saying, but when I search for it Mr. Strickland's name comes up, which is good enough for me to point to him as guy who said it best. To be fair, after this Strickland pauses and realizes he's not getting through to Marty and says,
as a matter of fact, in a lot of ways you remind me of your father. He was a slacker too.
Sick burns. Let's find out how Marty responds. Tomorrow, I mean.